Friends, welcome to our Sunday edition of Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga, which we beam every Sunday on our social media channel of Virat Hindustan Sangam across the globe. We this we beam this program on our four channels, that is uh, Periscope, Twitter Periscope, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And we thank for the support we get across the globe on Sunday for people to watch this program with our founder, patron, Dr. Subramaniam Swami. We also have a Saturday show which is known as on each topic, like the present series going on is Economic Words of Wisdom, that is Arth Gyan Ganga, and yesterday we completed our 11th episode. As far as our Sunday show or program is concerned, we started as a daily show on the 2nd of April 2020 during the lockdown, and we have then converted it into a weekly Sunday show. And today's is the 109th episode in the series which we have, where Dr. Swami and some experts discuss on various topical and public interest issues on the program for the benefit of our viewers and members of the Virat Hindustan Sangam. Today we have a very interesting subject, which is a very current issue topic, and the topic is Israel fights back Hamas terror. And what you all know what's happening in Israel and the Gaza and the surrounding areas. So we have for this in our discussion Dr. Subramaniam Swami, and we also have with us Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who will be in our show today in discussion. He and Dr. Swami will be discussing today's subject. As you all know, that he is a regular popular commentator on many of our Indian channels, TV channels, and Abhijit Iyer Mitra is a senior research fellow, Nuclear Security Program NSP, and associated with the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, IPCS. Abhijit Mitra's Iyer Mitra's research focuses on defense issues, specializing in defense economics, technology, and procurement and nuclear dynamics. He also deals with governance issue and non-traditional security threats. He has been a visiting fellow at the Sandia National Laboratory, New Mexico, and Stimson Center, Washington, D.C. He holds a MA in International Relations from Monash University, Melbourne. So with this, we will be starting our show. But before we start, I must thank my co-host, Ramesh Swami, and Professor Arvind Chaturvedi. We will back with a break from a break. He had he was affected, but he has totally recovered from COVID. So we welcome him back to our program, Professor Arvind Chaturvedi. I also have to thank our technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Tejas Navalgul, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Swaminathan, and Vishal Mehta for their support to put this Saturday and Sunday program together. Also, for the benefit of our viewers, I wish to inform you that yesterday's Economic Words of Wisdom, that is Arth Gyan Ganga, where Dr. Swami gave a lecture, we had a viewership of 33,803 viewers across the globe. Last Sunday's Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga, where Sanjaya Baru was there discussing governance issues, we had a viewership of 82,740. And as you all know, our programs are all available on YouTube. You can always go back in case you have missed any online program. Go to YouTube and search for Virat Hindustan Sangam channel, and you'll get all our past episodes, lectures, and talks where Dr. Swami has participated and other guests have participated. Before we start our discussion, I must thank Yaakov Filkinstein, the Israeli Consul General in Mumbai, who has sent us a message on what is happening in Israel. So we will be playing a live message from him before we start the discussion. So I would now have the message played here, and then we will have a discussion with Dr. Swami and Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Over the last week, almost 2,000 rockets were launched by Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza on Israeli cities and citizens. Among the 10 casualties, there is an Indian citizen from Kerala, a 5-year-old boy, and a 16-year-old Muslim girl with her father, and more women, elderly people, and children. That shows that Hamas terrorist is blind. It doesn't discriminate between men and women, young and old, Israelis, Indians, Jews, Muslims. And that shows us that a terror is a terror is a terror. As in such, we should fight terror together. Democracies like India and Israel should fight terror together. And this is what we are doing. Unfortunately, India is well experienced with terror itself. And they can understand what the Israeli people are going through. Hamas did it for one sole reason, to eliminate Israel. Don't fall for any of the propagandas of Hamas. It's neither to promote the Palestinian cause, nor to protect the Muslim right of religion in Israel. Those who want to do peace with Israel, like Egypt, like Jordan, like Palestinian Authority, and recently United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and many other countries, Morocco, Albania, they all know how to do this. Israel is a peace-seeking country. They have many friends among the Arab countries and the Muslim countries around the world. Hamas is trying to destabilize the region because they could not get the upper hand in the Palestinian elections that were recently cancelled, and because, as I said, the sole purpose is to eliminate Israel, and we cannot let this happen. For this, Hamas is committing a double war crime. The first crime is that they are using Palestinians as human shields. They are launching the rockets from within the Palestinian population in Gaza, from schools, from private houses. And the second war crime is that they are deliberately targeting Israeli cities and citizens. The result, as I said, many casualties, among them children, women, and elderlies. We cannot tolerate the situation, and we won't. Israel will do whatever it takes to protect its citizens and its sovereignty. Just like India. I mean, think, what would you do if one rocket would fall over India? Let alone 1,000 rockets, let alone 2,000 rockets, day and night, constantly. And mind you, this is not the first round of hostilities. Every few years, unfortunately, we have to go this again, since Hamas captured Gaza by force. Our dear friends, we enjoy great support around the world and in India. You can see leaders like from Austria and from Czech Republic who are waving the Israeli flag in solidarity over their national institutes. We got same calls from Japan, from Czech Republic and others. And we have a great support from the Indian people because, as I said, you know what terror is. You know that terror is a common enemy. India and Israel, we're fighting the COVID-19 together. We send you equipment when you need it. You send us equipment when we need it. We do research together. We try to find solutions together. We fight the terror together as well. So I'm grateful for Swami Subramanian Ji and the Virat Hindustan Sangam for taking this important initiative together with Jagdish Shetty Ji and the Friends of Israel in India, because we want you to raise the word of the truth. We want you to tell the world that Israel is a peace-seeking country, that Hamas is a terror organization. It's committing crimes against its own people. 20% or so of the missiles that they launch fall on their own population, because these are homemade missiles. About 20% of them fall, injure, and kill Palestinian citizens. This is reported by Palestinian human rights organizations themselves. So they are the enemies of the Palestinian people. We would like to have peace, we would like to restore order, and we would like to see Israel flourishing together with its neighbors. just like India and any other country. I again thank you and the organizer for this important event, and I urge you to support us under the hashtag of India supports Israel. Let the world know that Israel supports India and also India supports Israel in this hard hour. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद and shukriya.
Well, you should give him applause. Yes, Jagdish.
Jagdish is frozen, Dr. Swami. So let's so as we normally begin the program, so we hand over
Yes.
the floor to you, so you can begin the introduction.
Yes.
And then, since Abhijit is our guest, so we can hear the expert, and then you and Abhijit can have a dialogue.
Yeah. Sure. So shall I take over?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jagdish and Ramesh. And of course, we have welcomed Arvind Chaturvedi back. I would like to begin by expressing our gratitude for the Excellency, the Consul General of Israel stationed in Bombay, in the Bombay Consulate, and his very nice message, which has been received very well by all of us. And we're going to show you, governments may come and governments may go, but India and Israel as friends will remain forever, because we have a very long history together. When the Israelis wanted to escape persecution, they came to India, the only country they themselves acknowledge where they were not persecuted again or isolated or put upon was the Indian nation. We have also, our spiritual leaders have met the chief rabbi. I've been a part of that conference that took place in Delhi, and then later on there was a conference in Jerusalem, and we came to the conclusion that we have a very long history together religiously, with contacts right from King Solomon's time. And although Judaism believes in a single God, it was explained by Swami Dayanand Saraswati that yes, we also believe in a single Ishwar, that is God, but we have many manifestations of it. That's the only difference. But otherwise, conceptually, we also believe in one God. And that removed a lot of misunderstandings created by people that Judaism and Hinduism has got nothing in common. So we are very clearly a nation which is grateful to Israel for the timely support, even when we did not give them full diplomatic relations. In 1962 war, 65 war, in 1971 war, in the Kargil war of 1999, Israel came and filled very big gaps in our armory and helped us, without any conditions. So therefore, we respect Israel for that. We also respect the Jewish community, the most brilliant people. I myself had Jewish teachers at Harvard, and I'll never forget what they did for me and how friendly and kind they were in pushing me up in the profession of economics and taught me the most advanced economics. And there were Nobel laureates like Simon Kuznets and Paul Samuelson. So therefore, we have much in common with the Israelis in both in social customs, in terms of respect for knowledge and elevation of people who follow, who purvey knowledge, are people who are on the highest part of society. So let it be assured that we are with Israel no matter what, and we know that today they are being put upon, they are being killed, they are not allowed to live in peace. Israel has never hesitated to part with territory if it would bring peace. In 81 or thereabouts, Israel had a treaty with Egypt, and they returned that whole of Sinai, which they had captured in 1967. And Sinai was full of oil, But still, when I went to Israel in 1982, the Prime Minister Menachem Begin received me, and I first asked him, "You had such a big chunk in your total control. Why did you give it away?" He said, "Well, we were promised peace, and that's why we did it." And that's what Egypt today is doing. A lot of countries of Muslim countries are now with Israel. Recently, you saw UAE has opened an embassy. So are so many other countries which have opened. And soon, I'm told that it will be only a matter of time because Saudi Arabia does so. So you will find this terrorist group, Hamas, will be isolated completely. So fight on, Israel. We are with you, and defend yourself and finish this menace. Let us understand one thing: Hamas is an organization, it's not a government. It may have got some people elected, but as representatives. But the Palestinian Authority was not created for them. They, as a terrorist organization, are being recognized as a terrorist organization by the United States, European Union, so many European nations. In East Asia also, there are nations which are regarded as a terrorist organization. And the UN considered a resolution to declare them as terrorists, but on a technicality of getting two-thirds majority. Majority, of course, voted to say that they are terrorists, but the technicality that it should be two-thirds majority, it couldn't go through. But whether UN passes or not, the whole world knows that they believe in violence. They have been engaged in violence, and we have been watching this on television. So let me add this, that Hamas should be treated by Indians just like we treated the LTT. They did not represent the Tamils, and they engaged in murder, targeting, all kinds of things, drug running. And ultimately, when the then president of Sri Lanka, and now the vice prime minister, Mr. Rajapaksa, took the step that can't go on bleeding like this. So it doesn't matter at one blow losing a lot of soldiers, but we'll finish them. And he finished them, and as a consequence, Indian security is also now much better. The same way, the sooner the Hamas is put to an end, the more likely there will be a peace in the Middle East, and the Israelis can live with the numerous Arab neighbors surrounding it in peace and development and so on. And that is the whole object today, is to through this broadcast, to tell the Israeli people, carry on, we are with you. We are, as Indian people, we are with you. Whoever is a patriotic Indian will support Israel, because Israel has supported us, and we have much in common with them historically. And we would like to see them prosper. They are people who have produced great technologies. Their desalination of seawater, that amazing thing was done by the Israelis, drip irrigation, so many things. And even their cows give 11,000 liters per year, when our cows are only giving 250 liters per year. So, I mean, Israel is really converted that desert land which was given to them, which was their ancestral land, and made it into a kind of a modern developed society. So with that, I am giving this background. We have Abhijit Mitra Iyer, or Iyer Mitra, because his father is a Bengali and his mother is an Iyer. And I first saw him and his mother because of her anti-corruption activities while being in the IAS. She was in the IAS. She was pursuing corruption in the government, and the then powers didn't like it. She suffered a terrible acid attack, but because of Parmacharya and Dr. P.C. Reddy's encouragement, I was able to find a excellent plastic surgeon. So today she doesn't even look as if she has had an attack from a distance. So her only son is Abhijit, and Abhijit is now regarded by most people. I can't, because I know him as a little boy, and I can't get over the fact that he couldn't be anything more than a little boy. But I do know that my colleagues all say in low voice, you know, this Abhijit guy, he's really terrific. Did you why don't you have him on your program? I said the thought never occurred to me. Yeah, he has come once, but you know, now on this issue of strategic angle of Israel-India friendship and the elimination of Hamas by the Israelis, he is extremely well equipped. He has one other qualification which he doesn't tell anybody. When his mother was a collector of a district in the first woman collector in the history of Tamil Nadu, Ms. Chandralekha became the collector. Abhijit was a very small young boy, not young boy, but a baby boy. And the mother had to go on travel and so on. So she had to have some friend who would look after him while she's away. And that friend happened to be Sasikala. So he has been weaned on Sasikala. And I hope we can use him in the future to bring about some kind of alliance between BJP and Sasikala through Mr. Abhijit. There's another strategic plan he has to draw up. So with that, over to you, Abhijit. You've got 20, 25 minutes and tell us all this of what's happening with Hamas and their background and what we need to do in terms of strategic alliance with the Israelis.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Swami. And since you've given such a hilarious introduction to me, I think I should give them about 2 minutes to stop laughing now before I start off my speech. So I'll start off my speech with a little bit of background on how this particular round started off. And then I'll go into all the sort of accusations that get lobbed against Israel. Because anti-Semitism is a very real thing. It is hidden, it is masked, but it is extremely real, and blood libel today against Jews is extremely real. So I'm going to deal with all of that. But what we're seeing today starts off in a place called Sheikh Jarrah. Now, Sheikh Jarrah is like a little neighborhood in Jerusalem. Now, when we say neighborhood, people living in Delhi are used to say GK or Karol Bagh, which are huge. If you live in Bombay, then it's Powai. If you live in Madras, it's Anna Nagar. All of them are massive. They would almost be the size of an entire Israeli city. So to give you a rough example, Israel is about less than half the size of Haryana. That is how small a country we're talking about. And in there, this particular colony of Sheikh Jarrah is maximum, say, about 2-3 streets. That's about it. Now, what has happened in Sheikh Jarrah is when Jews started migrating back to Israel in the 1800s, this became a Jewish neighborhood. They had legal paperwork. They bought the land. They were hardworking, good people. They bought the land. And they've owned property papers for that ever since. And the problem was that as soon as the Arabs started attacking Israelis, the British decided Jews being out there wasn't a very good idea, because the British policing model was that maximum tax extraction, profit extraction, minimum service provision. It is the duty of the occupied peoples to maintain their own peace. We are only here to see to it that you don't create trouble for us. So what happened was, living in Sheikh Jarrah, they were constantly getting attacked. The Jews were getting attacked. The British would keep evacuating them, saying, look, we don't have the money to protect you. We have neither the interest nor the money to protect you, so get lost. In 48, when Israel declares independence, and Jordan, it was immediately attacked. The same day it declared independence, it was attacked by all of its neighbors in complete violation of the UN. So, everybody talking about the law today conveniently forgets that Israel was established as per law, as per international law by the UN in 1948. They all attacked Israel. And this particular part of Jerusalem was captured by Jordan, which immediately ethnically cleansed it. There wasn't a single Jewish family left. 20 years later, in 1967, when this part of Jerusalem was recaptured by the Israelis, all the Jews who had been ethnically cleansed or forcibly evacuated from there, they came back to the Israeli Supreme Court and said, hey, here are our documents. We own own this, paid money for this. We have legal property documents from the Ottoman Empire for this. And we want an enforcement of this, of our property rights. It has taken almost 40 years now for it to get to the final stage. And you know what happened? The Israeli Supreme Court, they said, look, you may have, but these people have lived here for 20 years. We can't just throw them out. So the Palestinians there are now protected citizens. They're protected residents. They are rent protected, and their tenancy is protected as long as, and their rent is also protected against inflation if they pay rent. The Palestinians refused to even pay rent. So not only did they not own the property, they grabbed the property and ethnically cleansed the people out there. They also refused to pay rent. At which point, like property cases happen in India, this is how this particular property case worked out in the Israeli Supreme Court as well. It was imminent now that the Supreme Court was going to give an order to evict them if they refused to pay rent. This tied in very neatly with a lot of other things happening, specifically the fact that Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, had called for elections. Now, mind you, these are the first elections they will be having in 16 years. Since 2005, neither the Gaza Strip nor the West Bank has had elections. And they are horrible, horrible dictatorships, both in Gaza and in West Bank. If you say anything about Mahmoud Abbas, you are taken, you are tortured by the intelligence services, and you're very lucky if you're returned alive. Far worse happens in Gaza. And the problem with all of this is that we ignore the absolute brutality of the Palestinian leadership, be it Hamas or Fatah, on their own people. Now, in the midst of all of this, this man calls for an election in the West Bank, which he is not sure that he's going to win. The problem isn't that there is an opposition, because he's wiped out the opposition. Even if he had held the election, it would be like a Saddam Hussein election where he wins 98% of the vote and everybody actually believes he got 98% of the vote. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that there was a lot of internal people within the PLO itself, within Fatah itself, that wanted to sabotage things. So he had an interest in stoking all of this. The third people that have had a very long interest in stoking this is this trio of highly problematic states: Iran, Qatar, and Turkey. Now, Turkey is very limited in what they can do because they're completely compromised to the Israelis. The Qataris use Al Jazeera to do whatever they want because Al Jazeera is a veritable foreign policy arm of the Qataris. And Iran, of course, loves trouble because they want to see less interference in Syria from the Israelis. So it was the perfect storm. Lots of things coming together that led to these riots. Now, it's very important you remember what happens in the sequence of events. The riots start, the Arabs start rioting in Jerusalem. The Palestinians start rioting in Jerusalem. The police goes in, and if you actually look at the videos, even though they're very carefully edited, you will see that the Palestinians went on pushing their women and children in front so that when the Israeli police lobs tear gas, it will only hit the women and children. They're using religious monuments to hide and to attack police from there. And when the Israeli police goes in, their first concern is for the genuine worshippers and women and children who you can see in several videos, they prioritize evacuating from there. So, you have to have sympathy for the Palestinians. They are not victims of Israel. They are victims of their own leadership, their own callous, frequently incompetent, very corrupt leadership, who use them as cannon fodder. And then what happened was Hamas starts rocket attacks in solidarity. Now, like the Israeli Consul General mentioned, because these are extremely crude homemade rockets, 20% of them fall back on the Gaza Strip itself. And the problem with that is Hamas doesn't really care, because every Palestinian woman or child killed is a great PR triumph for Hamas because they can immediately blame it on Israel, and the international press won't even check. Hamas will just say there was an Israeli strike, these people were killed, and the press will lap it up. We've seen, and in India, we should be particularly sympathetic to this because we've seen this happen in Kashmir over and over and over again. Now, let's get to the technical details of all of this. What can we learn from the Israelis being Indians? What can the Iron Dome do for us? I'm not going to go into what all you've seen the Iron Dome do because it's very spectacular. You can see videos, it's all over the internet right now. What we need to learn from the Israelis is management of tactics, management of population control. They don't do stupid things like we do in Kashmir, which is saying first time stone pelters will get government jobs. They don't go around believing that terrorists can be bought off like the Indian state did. So you go to Srinagar, for example, all the big malls are owned by former terrorist leaders and they're all funded by IB and raw funds because there's a belief we can buy them over. The problem is because the Indian state doesn't kill terrorists and Pakistan does, they continue to take money from India but peddle the Pakistani line. So there are a lot of tactics that Israel can teach us about controlling a population. Next, let's look at technology. There is a reason Iron Dome can work in Israel, but it cannot work in India. Remember, Israel, the per capita income is very, very high. The population density is extremely high. The economic concentration from north to south is very big, and it is absolutely tiny. Like I said, it is half the size of Haryana. India is a very, very big country. So Iron Dome doesn't make economic sense having it in India because other than, say, a few cities in Punjab, even if terrorists in Pakistan were to use rockets like this, they can't really come that far in. And also the economic footprint that they protect doesn't make sense. Now, how did Israel make economic sense of this? Because these rockets coming in, they are literally, think of them as your Diwali rockets, except that a Diwali rocket explodes when it goes up in the air. These explode when they come back down on the ground. So what happens here is one of these rockets that Hamas fires is about $300 maximum. And we're talking about the extremely long range rockets. An Israeli Iron Dome that goes out to intercept them, on the other hand, costs about $80,000 a piece. And the way it makes economic sense is that 90% of Hamas rockets usually miss targets and they land in all kinds of non-populated areas. So the interception burden comes down to only 10%. And this is not including the 20% that failed at launch and fell back in Gaza. So here you're only intercepting 10% of the 80% that got through. And out of that, what happens is the Iron Dome then starts to make economic sense given the opportunity cost of what are all the factories and homes that it is protecting. In India, that does not make economic sense. So, even buying it for India, we need to learn from Israel in terms of tactics, in terms of financial forensics, in terms of legality, of human rights during war and things like that, what is called jus in bello, justice in war, so on and so forth. So, like I said, during the Q&A, I'm sure we can take questions on this. The next set of accusations that get lobbed at Israel are to do with legality, with human rights, with proportionality, with aggression, and with targeting. I want to point out here there is absolutely no moral equivalence between what Israel is doing and what Hamas is doing. Israel is very, very clearly only targeting terrorists who they have credible, valid, demonstrable intelligence on. And even then, when they target them, they are so careful because they only want to kill the terrorist. They don't want to kill his child or his wife. When they know somebody else is in the house, they've got something called a double tap technique, that they drop 2 sound bombs. What these sound bombs are, they make a very loud noise, like, our Diwali ka atom bomb, but they don't actually cause damage. They're a warning saying, we're going to hit you. You have 10 minutes left. Go out of the house. Then they drop the second bomb saying, now you have 5 minutes left. Get out of the house. And then finally they bomb you. Right? Now, when Hamas, on the other hand, fires in Israel, their entire tactic is to kill Israeli civilians. because those missiles those rockets are simply not accurate enough to hit military targets. So there is a clear distinction. What Hamas is doing is outright war crimes. What Israel is doing is completely within the rights of self-defense, and it follows every single rule of war. Now let's look at what the specific rules of war are. One is legality. Now, many people say that because Israel is a more powerful country, it shouldn't be responding the way it does. Now, remember, aggression, the legality of aggression is that the person who starts the war is the aggressor. Just because somebody is more powerful doesn't make them the aggressor. If that were the case, you would have to say that that gentleman Sachin Vaze who placed a bomb outside Anil Ambani's, Mukesh Ambani's house, Mukesh Ambani was responsible for it. Why? Because he was the rich, powerful man. That's not the way aggression works. Right? Just because a murderer goes and kills a rich man doesn't mean the rich man is responsible for his own murder, or the powerful man is responsible for his own murder. That is not the way aggression works. And in this case, it is very clear. Ever since Palestine split into two bicephalous units in 2005, West Bank under Fatah and Gaza under Hamas, Gaza, the right of protecting the people in Jerusalem lies with the West Bank, not with Gaza. So it is not only aggression on part of Hamas, it is unqualified aggression on part of Hamas. Second, proportionality. They say they are only firing rockets. You, on the other hand, are going bombing everything from the air, sea, land, everything. Please understand, proportionality has a very specific meaning in international law, which is if a country resorts to a course of action, in this case rockets, the other country has every right to do whatever is necessary to stop the immediate threat. Now, what does it take to launch rockets? It takes leaders to give the orders. It takes a communication system to communicate those orders. It takes a transportation system to take the rockets from their bunkers and put them out to the launch pads. It takes bunkers to store those rockets. It takes trucks and cars to move people around and to move the rockets around. It also requires a communications and intelligence network, intelligence to see when Israeli planes are not overhead, so that we can safely take rockets and fire. You look at every single Israeli strike that has happened, it has followed that fundamental principle of international law in war, which is called proportionality. Everybody says that, oh my God, they went and bombed a press building which housed Al Jazeera, Associated Press, and BBC. Well, what does it tell you about journalists who are supposed to report about Gaza who didn't even know what was happening in their own building? Would you trust anybody to report on Gaza who didn't know that there were terrorists hiding in their own building? And even there, what Israel has done is they've given them 1 hour to vacate the building. They called up the owner of the building and told him, please vacate your building. They called up the security of the building and told them, please vacate your building. They called up Al Jazeera journalists that they knew, Associated Press journalists and BBC journalists, and told them to vacate the building, gave them 1 hour to vacate, and then bomb it. Right. So they have tried to minimize casualties as far as possible. I would urge you to look back to 2014, I think it was, when an NDTV camera crew captured the fact that Hamas was firing rockets from a hotel that housed international journalists into Israel. Why? Because they wanted Israel to bomb the hotel. In this conflict also, we have seen that the Emirati head, the head of the United Arab Emirates Red Cross, has put up a video where he's clearly saying that Hamas was coming and fire rockets from within the Red Cross, within the Emirati Red Cross compound, in the hope that Israel would hit Emirati Red Cross workers. So remember, this isn't about religion. Israel cares more about Muslims and Palestinians than Hamas does. For Hamas, women and children dying is the best publicity for them. And mind you, both the PLO and Hamas, they don't care about the Palestinian people. I know a lot of children of Hamas and PLO leaders who live in Paris, Boston, Washington, and all those places. I have never seen anybody live in that kind of wealth. So while their people are rotting in Palestine, they they go on this business of collecting funds, claiming Israeli atrocities, and live fabulous lives going from 5-star hotel to 5-star hotel, traveling first class. Right? So please understand what is happening out here. Next, finally, the last point that I want to make is today a very a US congressperson known for making particularly vacuous remarks put out a tweet saying an apartheid state is not a democracy. I'd like to remind you there is no law in Israel that is apartheid. There is no citizen of Israel can be discriminated against based on religion. If anything, Israelis have a greater duty towards the state, which is not required of its non-Jewish citizens, because all Druze and Jews have to do compulsory military service. The Druze were exempted from it, and then the Druze requested that it be made compulsory, which is why it was made compulsory. Muslims are not required, Arabs, so Muslims and Christians are not required to do compulsory military service even. So it is quite the reverse of apartheid. The majority actually accepts a disproportionate responsibility of security of the state, whereas everybody enjoys equal rights in Israel. So it is not an apartheid. Israel is a vibrant, functioning democracy. On the other hand, Hamas in 2005 took out all the Fatah operatives and threw them from roofs, put tires around their necks and set them on fire, knifed them, killed them, threw them off buildings and God knows what not. And Fatah did the same to Hamas operatives in the West Bank. Neither of them have held an election in the last 15 years. So let us be very, very clear. There is not one count today on which you can hold Israel responsible for either the escalation or even starting this up. Israel is the victim out here. And we need to sympathize with Israel. And more than that, we need to sympathize with the Palestinian people who Israel cares about, but who have been used and discarded and badly abused by their own criminal leadership. Thank you.
As an excellent presentation of facts which obviously have done a lot of research. So I'll ask my colleagues whether they would like to lead off and ask questions of you, and then I will, in the end, sum up the discussion.
Okay. So, Dr. Swami, let me go first.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to leave it to Jagdish ji. So, okay, go ahead, Jagdish ji.
No.
Okay. So, now my question is this. I mean, India has a woeful record in voting against Israel in the UN, right? So, I want some few thoughts on that from Abhijit, if that's possible. I mean, India's so-called support of Israel, I mean, it's more of a facade than actually real. I mean, that's my perception. I may be wrong, so I'd like Abhijit to correct that if that's wrong.
Unfortunately, in India, gratitude has always been a very heavy burden to carry for anybody. But in India, unfortunately, it seems to be like Hanuman lifting the mountain kind of a burden. But there are several aspects to this. First is, like Dr. Swami mentioned in his opening remarks, was this chummy relationship between the PLO and Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. And what used to happen throughout that period was that Palestine used to keep supporting they used to sponsor anti-India resolutions at the OIC. In fact, during the terror strikes that happened a few years back, the Hamas, not Hamas, the Palestinian ambassador, that is to say the PLO ambassador to Pakistan, had visited Hizbul Mujahideen and Lashkar-e-Toiba camps, not on one, but on 3 separate occasions, to stress, Palestinian Muslim bhai. Now, coming from that, you would think that India would kind of open its mind up. No, we've got this sort of Stockholm syndrome, because it is explained without any kind of statistical corroboration, I might add, that if the Indian government supports Israel, the Muslim vote bank will not vote for us. There is zero statistical proof of that. Then the fallback explanation becomes that if we vote for Israel, there might be riots in India. Again, there is zero statistical proof for that. So it basically comes down to this cowardice. And, in India, everything happens. Even now, if you go to the finance ministry and ask for statistics, they'll take, for what you need for tomorrow, they'll take 6 years to give you. They don't even know where to gather the statistics themselves. In the last organization I worked for, we bought statistics from 32 different government departments, and they were so detailed. They went 5,000 households. There were 500,000 households. Each one of them had collected 500,000 households. They sold the entire database to us for a few lakhs because they didn't even know what to do with the statistics they had collated. They didn't even know which language they had been collated in, what kind of coding had happened, and it was completely a job of matching apples and oranges. So in India, policy is not based on data; it is all based on how you feel, which accounts for the kind of shoddy policy which doesn't look at first order effects, second order effects, and third order effects of policy. Number one. Number two, this is probably going to change, because this excuse of the Sunnis will be against us or the Shias will be against us is evaporating. We have seen the Shias, unlike the Sunnis, are now at the top of the economic ladder. You look at the Daudi Boras and people like that, they're very rich. They don't vote based on community lines. They vote based on economic interest. Who is good for business, we're going to vote for them, etc., etc. So they are not beholden to the mullahs in Tehran. Number one. If you look at the Sunnis, what is happening is the way the Emiratis and the Saudis are now backing India to the hilt. By the way, which has nothing to do with Indian diplomacy. It all has to do with Israeli diplomacy. This is one thing nobody wants to talk about, that Saudi Arabia and UAE haven't softened on India and become so chummy with India because of anything India has done in the last 7, 10, 15 years. It is entirely because of their normalization with Israel, and Israel kind of said, calm down kind of thing. So what has happened here is that you will see invariably that this need for validation that a lot of Sunnis have because of this concept of takfir, wherein an Arab interpretation of the Quran takes precedence over all other non-Arab interpretations of the Quran. They keep going back to the Saudis and Emiratis for validation. And the more and more pro-India they get, the less salient Israel will become in foreign policy, which will enable the government. Now, will the government have the guts to do it? That I don't know.
About the UN voting record, I mean, even off late in March, again, India voted against Israel. I mean, do you have any comments on that? I mean, what is this? Why? I understand it's this psychology that, the Muslims will start hating us, kind of a nonsense that they believe in. But they have consistently voted against Israel. I mean, in spite of Israel coming out of the way, helping us during COVID times, whatever crisis, because as Dr. Swami said, India was one of the refuges of Jews when the persecution started. I mean, it is just mind-boggling that a country would commit this kind of a harakiri every time at the UN. So, your thoughts
so when
on
you
that?
have when somebody described this government as being not a BJP government but an IAS government with outside support from the BJP. So when you have IAS and IFS people running the government who have all been either trained in JNU or the JNU mindset, where Israel is default the aggressor, then this is how you have policies that are made. They are warped, brainwashed policies. Instead of expanding the foreign service and bringing its training up to modern standards, in fact, under the current foreign minister, the size of your foreign service is actually reduced. They can't do any primary research. They can't do anything on their own, and they depend entirely on rhetoric. It's just rhetoric, more rhetoric. They think rhetoric is a substitute for hard work. They think rhetoric is a substitute for academic knowledge. They think rhetoric is a substitute for primary research. They think rhetoric is a substitute for policy. And unfortunately, when you are essentially have chaprasis masquerading around as babus, you're going to end up having a chaprasi foreign policy.
I'm going to steal one of your lines, Abhijit. You said that is it probably the Arabs, they lean onto the Saudi and Emirati way of looking at the Quran. I think the Hindus also have a disease like that. We go to the Max Muller versions of it to describe what Hinduism is. Very
yeah.
We believe
also
Max Muller.
One other thing, though, this is a technical point. Israel, every time you go up to the Israelis and say, dude, I'm sorry, my country voted against you, they're like, don't worry, it's fine. We're so used to this, we don't really care. There are two things. One is a Naam ke Vaste resolution and one is an operational resolution. The operational resolutions are the dangerous resolutions because they force Israel to do certain things. So what they tell me is India tends not to vote on those operational resolutions, but they vote against Israel on all the non-operational, the Naam ke Vaste resolutions. Like, the way the OIC keeps condemning India but does nothing about it. So, or the Emiratis or Saudis, they will accept the OIC voting against India, but they will not criticize India anymore. In fact, during Article 370 and CA NRC, they said, this is India's internal matter. We don't want to get involved in this. Thank you very much. And India has a right to do what it does under the constitution. So there's a mix and match of everything out there. Slight pockets of competence in a vast sea of undulating incompetence.
Jagdish, go ahead.
Arvind, it's your question. Arvind, आपका सवाल.
My question is to both Dr. Swami and Abhijit. In fact, it is an extension of what Ramesh Swami had asked, but I'll put it in different words. To what extent will India's foreign policy be governed by, or India's Israel policy be governed by the import of crude oil? It is a well-known fact that we survive because of the crude oil from the Gulf. And whether the import of crude oil governs our Israel policy, number one. Number two, I'm not fully convinced by Avijit's answer to the question Ramesh had asked earlier, that we always look at the Muslim appeasement before we decide our Israel policy, whether there's a BJP in power, Modi in power, not Modi in power, Congress in power. How long do we continue? More than 50, 60 years we have seen this policy, that we are only for Muslim appeasement and the Israel policy is governed by Muslim appeasement.
Yes, Avijit.
Oh, should I answer first? Okay. So, fuel has actually started playing a much less important role since the 90s. In fact, after the Oslo peace process the Madrid peace process started, when we normalized, we recognized Israel formally. What happens is, you look at the number of Arab sanctions against us, they have systematically reduced. The closer we get to Israel, the less the Arabs seem to sanction us. I can honestly tell you, if anybody has toured on the ground in any of these Muslim countries, there is a great deal of anger against the Palestinians and admiration for Israel. They can't talk about it openly, but I have friends, Israeli friends, who have moved to the Emirates in the last 2-3 months since the normalization and started up their businesses out there. And, because they very proudly go around wearing these lapel pins, with an Israeli flag and an Emirati flag. When this whole thing started, people at the malls were coming out and saying, "Say strong, we are with you, we are with you." Of course, the Emirati government will never say that, but there is a whole history to this. Because wherever the Palestinians have gone, they have been an extremely disturbed and disturbing minority. Remember, Lebanon gave them refuge. They abused that refuge, engaged in all kinds of terrorist activities in Lebanon, went so far as to bomb the American embassy in Beirut and things like that. In Jordan, they tried to take over the government of Jordan. They tried to depose the king and take him over, even though he had been so kind and offered them refuge. And it was actually Muhammad Ziaul Haq and the Pakistani army that were sent to Jordan to quell that uprising. And Ziaul Haq and the Pakistani army killed about 3,500 Palestinians out there. So much for their pro-Palestinian stance right now. During the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, what had happened was the PLO went and supported Iraq, and that made Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, all of them really irate, because they're like, look, we are the ones giving you money. We're the ones giving you refugee status and allowing you to run your things. And you go support Iraq when they commit aggression against us, not on. So they've had a whole historical baggage to this. So it's not so much about, the fuel as it is about interpersonal relations between the Palestinians and the Arabs, and between India and the Arabs, and between India and Israel. You can see the India-Israel triangle. It's a triangle like this. India, Israel, the more India got closer to Israel, we could use it as leverage, because before that we could only beg the Arabs. After that, we had leverage against them. Then when the entire Iraq war and the hostility between the Arabs and the Palestinians sets in, or the Palestinian leadership sets in, it's a huge bonus for us. And third is the entire thing of the the Palestinians sort of alienating a lot of the native people. So it has nothing to do with fuel. Zero.
My own experience of having been in government and outside, I don't think this Muslim factor has played any role whatsoever. I was told that the day we recognize Israel, the Muslims will be on the street rioting. Nothing of the kind happened. That when the Ram temple is handed over to the Hindus, the Muslims will riot. Nothing of that kind happened. I think it's used as an excuse, and my own contacts, and I had friends amongst the Arabs also, Saudi Arabians, some notorious, some not so notorious. And I found essentially most of our politicians are blackmailable by the West Asian countries. They have their money laundering is done there. Dubai is a great center. The cinema world draws its money from Dubai, from Dawood Zubi in particular. So essentially, it's the fear of being exposed, and it was more when the Congress was in power, because they had been longer at this. And then earlier than that, it was the Russian influence. Syria was pro-Russia, Saddam was pro-Russia, for a time being Egypt was pro-Russia. So Gaddafi, of course, was very pro-Russia. So, I mean, it was called Soviet Union in those days. And the Muslim was used as an excuse. And Narasimha Rao proved it's all nonsense. He in fact had Yasser Arafat come here, and he said, yes, I fully support India having the diplomatic relations. We had already recognized Israel in 1948, but we didn't have diplomatic relations. So this Muslim thing is, in my opinion, all nonsense. It's basically to protect your skin from you being exposed, or your activities in the Middle East, your money laundering there, your properties you own there. These are really the factors which make us think like this. When this Hamas to be declared as a terrorist organization, India voted against it. They sided with the people who were with Hamas, and there was no explanation. I mean, which Muslim is going to be angry if we vote against, we vote to make Hamas as a terrorist organization? So, therefore, we should not be carried away by these excuses. And we must say it is the weakness of our leaders that they have two lives, one which is in private and one which is in public, and they don't want their private life to come out in public. That blackmail, implicit blackmail, is responsible for much of our policies. I would say that in present also, why are we so meek with the Chinese? They're sitting on your territory, and mutually agreed territory, from 1993 onwards, and you're not willing even to take their name. What is it that the Russians have? They are junior partners of China. Why are we all the time saying, okay, we'll have a meeting in Russia? What is where's the secret? The Americans say we'll impose sanctions if you take S-400. What's your difficulty? The Americans are willing to give you the equivalent, in fact, better ones, including F-35 aircraft. But you're saying no. We will buy it from the Russians. We are friends with everybody. You can't be friends with everybody. We just now found out. Nobody is with you today.
Yeah.
You can't be friends with everybody. You have to choose partners. You have to make commitments. There has to be a mutuality. Then only you will get genuine support. Otherwise, everybody will dump you like they dumped Jawaharlal Nehru in 1962. Even Sri Lanka turned against us in 1962. They sided with the Chinese. So that's how I see it. So Jagdish,
Dr.
what's
Swami,
your-
I have a question. There has been a change of government in 2014. The BJP has a majority in parliament, and the RSS Sangh Parivar is supposed to be controlling or at least guiding the political powers in India. And the Hindus always stood with the Israelis or the Jews, this type of people. So, in spite of the change of government and a new type of people, at least a philosophy in place, why you think the government is still towing the old Congress line as far as Israel is concerned? In some way, the old line. My question is to Dr. Swami and then perhaps to Abhijit.
well, you see, this is as I told you. I mean, we are not independent when it comes to foreign policy. The mere fact that we crave so much for their praise, and if they don't praise you, then you get all your fake ID guys to go and blast them left, right, and center. I think you just tell me one thing: the Chinese have occupied your territory. Why are you allowing Chinese companies to work in India? You see in the port in Gujarat, which Adani has, then the one next to it, the Chinese are still manning it. They are there. Their companies are all over the place. Your cricket, why did you have to have a Chinese company for broadcasting? So these are not rationally explainable. These only means that you are too scared to get on the wrong side. And there can be only one reason why get too scared to get on as a leader of the country. Why can't you mention the Chinese are aggressors? You have not, the Prime Minister has even today not taken the name of the Chinese. At one stage, he said something and didn't repeat, koi aaya nahi, koi gaya nahi, which is not true. Then they said that they have all withdrawn. Now we are saying, no, they have not withdrawn, because the whole international press is saying, Abhijit must have seen all those satellite photographs to know they have not withdrawn. So don't look for rational explanations. The irrational fear of compromised people, they are not only in politics, they are also in the bureaucracy, they are in our media. Oh, my media is so highly compromised. If you have good friends in a foreign country, they'll tell you how easy it is to get a news item printed in India. So this is the thing. The moment you stand independent, then you will be declared as a fanatic, as a megalomaniac, and so on and so forth. So therefore, you don't become. You compromise. You say publicly something, but privately you tell them, no, we don't mean this, but we'll be going along with you. That's what it meant. Abhijit, you want to add anything?
Just two very, very short parts to this. In India, we have this wonderful thing called crimes of commission. But omission isn't classified as a crime. It's an error of omission, not a crime of omission. So all the crimes that people do get hidden under the garb of incompetence. You think it is incompetence, but it is actually a crime. It is masked as incompetence. And the second quick thing that I will finish up with is, a paraphrase from Ozymandias, the poem. Men may come and men may go, but incompetence goes on forever. So, it's the institutional handover of incompetence.
I'll add one thing
And
more.
we know what that incompetence is.
Yeah, I know. What Jagdish said, he said one more thing. See, to expect the RSS to play the role of politicians is unfair to RSS. RSS created Jansang only when they found nobody in parliament was defending them when Nehru was attacking them day and night. And I've seen them in operations. They just don't want to get into this governance thing at all. They want their organizations to become bigger and bigger. But they have very rarely, there are occasions when they have intervened. And when they have intervened, I've benefited, so I know it. But those are, very rare situations. Normally, they do not interfere in the governance of the state. And only when they feel that it requires a course correction and otherwise we'll all sink together, they intervene. But even when Vajpayee was there, I can tell you, I won't name names, but there were senior RSS people, not only in RSS, but in Vishwanda Parishad and so many other sister organizations. They were very unhappy with Vajpayee. And one indication is that when I came into, I didn't join BJP in 1980, but when I joined in 2013, there was not even a single suggestion that I should go and meet Vajpayee and seek his blessings, except Mr. Jaitley, because everybody overruled him. But other than that, there was none. So RSS, you do the right thing. It is my responsibility as a politician to rectify it. And RSS should not be dragged into it unless they feel that the country is going to collapse or there's going to be a major Holocaust or something. Then they give up their organizational interests and come into it. But I don't think that it's. A lot of people tell me, why is RSS keeping quiet? I said, why shouldn't they not keep quiet? You're keeping quiet, they can also keep quiet. It's the job of politicians in the party to stand up and not expect someone else to do your work, especially when they are not going to be rewarded. If tomorrow RSS does something, what is the reward they're going to get? So they're not in that game. So I think it's about time we made it very clear to all the people that RSS comes along fine, but and they have opinions. They'll tell you privately, you have gone too far, or that is on a personal basis. But to expect them to rectify what has gone wrong in a party, I think it's too much for them, too much burden for them. They already in the elections, they provide you the polling booth agents, and they give you feedback on what's going on and all that. So many things they do for free. So I've seen, I'm saying all this because I'm seeing increasingly in the media saying RSS is keeping quiet, RSS is complicit. I'm saying that I know them very well, having also been friends for a long time, but I've also had my tip with them when I misunderstood them. And now I know for a fact that what they are doing for their organizational interest is absolutely correct. It's our primary objective. If we go under, then one can expect them to come give a lifting hand, but nothing more than that.
Dr. Swami, just a small thing from what you just said. India looks towards the West for some kind of an acknowledgement or acceptance. I term it as a white man acceptance syndrome, but I guess it also has a noble intention. So,
Nobel.
Nobel
or Nobel.
So it's kind of
E before L.
So the thing, if you look at it that way, let's take this thing that, India looks at the West for some motivation to support whatnot. Every quote unquote Western nation has come out and supported Israel against this, or what's happening right now. But India has still not seen it. Maybe, the letter did not reach there yet. I'm not so sure. Is it still somebody carrying it from the New York? Maybe the flights are not there.
Maybe your foreign minister has been quarantined again and he's not able to tell.
No, but it is fascinating because every nation out there has gone and supported it. Of course, we have
No,
we have a new
Hamas is not a state. It's
Yeah, it
not
is a terror
Palestinian
organization, Dr.
Authority.
It
It's
is a
an
terror.
organization which is known to be a terrorist organization. And the majority of the UN voted to declare them as terrorist organizations. We, of course, we didn't. But then what you find. So I don't see what this resistance is. The usual off-the-record remarks given to me by officials of the external affairs ministry is that we want to be balancing,
Okay.
because
Okay.
that means there's a new version of non-alignment.
Okay.
In the end, no one will stand by you. It's like that famous story in Panchatantra about the bat, which with some people it claimed it was like a bird because it has got wings and it flies, and and to the animals it said, "I'm like you because I look like a rat." And when the war between the birds and the animals took place, and then a truce was there, they exchanged notes. Where's that bat? And they said, one of them said, "This is what it said." And so that's why both birds and the animals got together and chased the bat, and the bat will never come out during daylight now. And if you catch it, it will be all standing upside down to mislead you. This is the situation we are in.
Arvindji, you can conclude.
No, before Arvind concludes, I have to ask a last one-liner. What do you think, Dr. Swami and Abhijit, will happen on this Israel-Hamas issue in the next 1 month? Just a one-liner from both of you. What is you see in the next 1 month happening on this? Maybe Abhijit will be first and then followed by Dr. Swami.
Well, you see,
Israel's
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
You have to have the last word, apparently. So
yeah, I have to have the last word.
Yeah. So Israel is going to hammer the living daylights out of Hamas, and all these haters, and let's face it, it's just modern day anti-Semitism, are going to go on piling crap on Israel. Israel isn't going to care because they aren't racked by inferiority complexes. They have confidence in themselves, which is how, that is the root of dharma. You look within for your source of strength. And that is what they do. So as long as you look within and understand what is within, you will always win.
Dr. Swami?
Well, I think what 2018 or so, they had a 50-day war with Hamas, if I'm not wrong, and but Hamas has not improved. So I don't see any incentive for Israelis now, because you have noticed that there should have been instantaneous condemnations from a series of countries. Nobody has said anything because the Hamas is actually unbearable for many, many Muslim countries also. And the United States has come out for the first time with this clarity to say Israel has a right to defend itself. And that's the bottom line. And there's only one way to defend: completely devastated. You see, the Palestinians actually have already one country called Jordan. They're 54% of Jordanian population. It's not that the Palestinians don't have a homeland. So therefore, the moderate elements of the Palestinians, if they want to continue with this West Bank and this what is now called the Strip, Gaza is called a Strip in popular international lingo, and if that is so, Hamas has to be boycotted by the Palestinians. That's the only way.
Okay, Arvind.
Thank you, Dr. Swami. Thank you, Abhijit. This issue, it has so much international importance and also has equal importance for India. In fact, 2 days back, when VHS had announced this program and this title, there was so much build-up for this issue, and social media was full of questions. These questions were expressed by Ramesh Swami and Jagdish Shetty. These questions people are asking on the street, that why BJP is not taking a very clear stand. And when we talk about BJP and Israel, we remember when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the external affairs minister in Janata government, he had even not openly declared that he had met Moshe Dayan. So
Yeah.
that is so much for the BJP's open policy of Israel. But the question is that if RSS is not going to govern, Modi is not going to take an action, then why would the Modi expresses on the slide that we are friendly with Israel, but we are not openly going to declare it? I mean, it is something which is so inconsistent for any policy of the government, especially the external affairs policy. And this inconsistency has been exposed time and again. And in last week, when the Indian government has not taken a very clear stand, it is really intriguing. And people are asking questions that when will BJP wake up? Virat Hindustan Sangam has taken up this issue because, in true sense of the term Virat, Israel is a Virat country. Israel has shown that character, what actually Virat is, and therefore we express our solidarity. And like many countries have said, that they have a right to self-defense. I think India should also wake up and own up and say that yes, Israel has right to self-defense and therefore declare open support. Abhijit has given such a nice account of the historical background of the Gaza Strip and West Bank and the conflict, the origin of the conflict. Thank you, Abhijit, for giving such a good account. Dr. Swami, as usual, he is known all over the world as the friend of Israel, and Israel also knows. And I think Dr. Swami's opinion counts, and therefore we hope that what Dr. Swami says about Israel, government of India will listen tomorrow and take an action. Thank you very much, Ramesh Swami. Thank you, Jagdish Shetty. Thank you. Thanks the technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Vishal Mehta, Tejas, and Ashish Shetty. Thank you all. We'll be meeting again on Saturday in Earth Gyan Ganga, 12th episode, and again on Sunday next in Words of Wisdom. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind.
And
Jai
thank you, Arvind Chaturvedi.